The Tonight Show stage shimmered beneath a wash of studio lights, polished to perfection, as if nothing chaotic could ever seep into this carefully engineered world. The audience buzzed with anticipation, waiting for a night of harmless laughter, playful teasing, and the kind of celebrity charm that late-night television sold like a comforting drug. The band hit their cue. Jimmy Fallon strutted onto the stage with his signature bounce, and applause cascaded over the room like thunder rehearsed 1,000 times before. Everything looked familiar, predictable, until it didn't. Tom Cruise sat in his chair with posture too rigid for comfort, a stillness that betrayed the tension curling beneath his practiced smile. His hands rested on his knees, fingers curled ever so slightly, as Fallon launched into his opening volley of banter. The crowd roared, conditioned to laugh even before the punchlines landed. Fallon leaned into his rhythm, a rhythm perfected over decades. Yet tonight, it rang differently. "Tom," Fallon grinned, tilting his head with mock curiosity. "You're still doing your own stunts, right? Even at your age?" The audience chuckled on cue, but something about the jab struck. Too sharp. Tom's smile faltered. He adjusted in his seat, eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly, and for a fraction of a second silence slipped into the room. Fallon, sensing the tension, pushed further, his instinct always to poke until laughter spilled over. "I mean, come on, hanging off planes in your 50s? Most of us can't even handle the stairs." Laughter again, but thinner this time. Tom leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate, carrying a weight that pierced through the superficial atmosphere. "You think it's funny," he said, his gaze locked on Fallon, "to reduce years of work, years of risk, into a punchline about age?" The room shifted. The audience stopped laughing, as though a collective awareness had struck. This was not part of the script. Fallon blinked, momentarily caught off guard, his grin stiffening into a mask. "It's just a joke," he replied, a hint of nervousness, placing his words. Tom didn't break eye contact. His tone sharpened, each word measured like a blade against stone. "Every time I step onto a set, I put my body on the line, not because it's easy, not because it's safe, but because it honors the craft. And yet, people like you reduce it to comedy fodder. Tell me, Jimmy, do you have any idea what it feels like to hang from the edge of a plane, knowing one mistake means your life?" The audience gasped softly, unsure of whether to laugh, clap, or stay silent. Fallon shifted in his seat, gripping his cue cards as though they could anchor him. His laugh came out thin, a sound less of amusement than of desperation. "Come on, Tom, people love your stunts. It's admiration, really." Cruise shook his head slowly. "No, it's dismissal. You turn dedication into caricature. You make what is sacred into spectacle. And maybe you get your laugh, but what you don't see is how those laughs echo, how they reinforce every headline, every mockery, every time someone decides that sincerity is weakness." Fallon's grin faltered, his lips tightening at the edges. The band, sensing the shift, fell silent. No cue cards could save him now. The cameras kept rolling, broadcasting every flicker of tension to millions of viewers at home. A woman in the audience whispered audibly, "This doesn't feel like comedy anymore." Cruise straightened, his presence commanding the stage in a way Fallon never anticipated. He wasn't a guest anymore. He was a witness, a prosecutor, a man stripping the varnish from the Tonight Show's easy laughter. Fallon swallowed, his eyes darting toward the producers off stage, but no one moved. The confrontation belonged to Cruise, and every second of silence drove the humiliation deeper. The Tonight Show, built on rehearsed joy, now trembled under the weight of authenticity. The curtain had slipped. The laughter machine faltered. And in that faltering, the nation saw something raw, a celebrity no longer willing to be reduced to a joke. Fallon had been here before. Moments when a guest stiffened, when a joke landed poorly, when the current of laughter didn't carry him. For years he had survived such stumbles by doubling down on charm, by wrapping tension in the velvet of humor until no one dared tug at the seams. Tonight, though, the cracks were harder to patch. He gripped his cue cards tighter, the sweat of his palm smudging ink along the edges. A forced laugh slipped from his mouth, a laugh meant not to amuse but to reassert control. Whoa, Tom, he said, leaning back theatrically in his chair. Easy there. I'm just trying to make people smile. Isn't that what we're all here for? The audience tittered a nervous ripple more than genuine amusement. Fallon fed off that sound, desperate to rebuild rhythm. He leaned forward, eyes twinkling with an exaggerated innocence, his voice pitched higher, as if he were playing the part of the harmless clown. You know, Fallon continued, flipping his hair back, I tease everyone. You're not special, buddy. I mean, come on, if I didn't make fun of you doing stunts at 50, I'd be making fun of, I don't know, Harrison Ford flying planes into golf courses. The audience chuckled, louder this time, grateful for the release of pressure. Fallon's relief was palpable. He smiled wider, gesturing with his hands in grand arcs, reclaiming his territory, humor as dominance, humor as distraction, humor as the weapon that turned discomfort into applause. But Cruz didn't move. His face remained still, unreadable, his jaw clenched tight. Fallon's energy swelled, but it collided with a wall of composure. You see, Tom, Fallon added, pointing playfully. This is how it works. You come here, we laugh. People love you even more, and you go home a hero. Everybody wins. Lighten up, man. Tom leaned forward again, his voice soft but sharper than before. Lighten up. He shook his head, eyes narrowing. That's what you always say. That's what all of you say. When you cross the line, when you mock what you don't understand, you hide behind those words. Lighten up. It's just a joke. Don't be so serious. Fallon's grin froze, but he pressed on, still wielding the only shield he knew. Tom, come on. People tune in for fun. If I can't poke a little fun, what's left? Should we just sit in silence and talk philosophy? He forced another laugh, louder, urging the audience to join him. Some did, though uneasily. Cruz didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady, the kind of gaze that held courtroom gravity, dissecting not the joke but the intent behind it. You think humor is harmless, he said slowly, his voice carrying beyond Fallon to the entire room. But when humor is used to dismiss, to belittle, to strip away dignity, it becomes something else. It becomes control. You laugh at me, and the audience learns to laugh too. And that laughter shapes how the world sees me. How it sees all of us. The words landed heavy. Fallon's laugh faltered, his fingers drumming nervously against the desk. His weapon, humor, suddenly felt like a blade dulling in his hands. He tried again, softer this time, his tone almost pleading. But isn't laughter a way to cope? To deal with how insane the world is? If we can't laugh at ourselves, Tom, what do we have left? Cruz's eyes softened, though his voice remained steady. Respect. That's what we have left. And the moment you use laughter to strip it away, you're no longer making people cope. You're teaching them to look down, to sneer, to mock. The studio grew quiet. The laughter had dried up. Fallon shifted in his chair, tugging at his sleeve, as though it were suddenly too tight. His smile wavered, trapped somewhere between desperation and defiance. For the first time, Fallon's greatest tool, the very rhythm of his career, felt powerless. The room no longer bent to his jokes. It bent to the weight of truth. And, though the band waited for a cue to play him out of the silence, Fallon didn't give it. He sat, still smiling but no longer in control, as the cameras captured the unraveling of his weapon live for the world to see. Tom Cruise had spent decades perfecting a mask. The mask of the movie star, dazzling smiles, light laughter, and energy so relentless it smoothed over every rough edge. On red carpets, in interviews, even in the face of ridicule, he wore it like armor. But under the studio lights of The Tonight Show, with Jimmy Fallon still hiding behind nervous jokes, the mask began to crack. He leaned forward, elbows resting firmly on his knees, and let the silence sit heavy between them. The audience shifted in their seats, whispering, their anticipation thick with the sense that something extraordinary and unplanned was about to happen. Fallon tapped his cue cards against the desk, the rapid rhythm betraying his nerves. Yet he tried one last quip. Tom, buddy, you're scaring me. You're not going to pull a Mission Impossible move on me, are you? Fallon forced out a laugh, expecting at least a smattering of chuckles to rescue him. This time, none came. Cruz's voice was calm, steady, and low, but it cut sharper than any joke. You've spent your career laughing at people like me. Not me as a man, not me as an artist, but the caricature, the punchline, the crazy actor who takes things too seriously. Do you know what that does? Do you know what it costs? Fallon blinked, swallowing hard, his rehearsed grin faltering. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene with applause or remain quiet witnesses. Cruz's words filled the silence with an intensity that belonged not to a late-night comedy show, but to a courtroom reckoning. He straightened, his eyes narrowing as he pressed on. I've been in this industry since I was a kid. Every role, every stunt, every interview, I gave everything. And still, every time I walked on a stage like this, I knew what was waiting. Not respect, not curiosity, laughter, not at the work, but at me. Fallon opened his mouth, but Cruz didn't let him speak. His voice rose, firm, his hand gesturing toward the audience. They laugh because you tell them to. You set the tone. You train them. And maybe you think it's harmless, but every time you turn me into a joke, you remind the world that no matter what I do, I'll never be more than your punchline. Gasps stirred through the studio. A woman in the front row clasped her hands together, whispering to the person beside her, "This is real. He's really angry." Fallon's face tightened. His usual weapon, mockery softened by charm, felt suddenly useless. He attempted another retreat. "Tom, look, I didn't mean," but Cruz cut him off. "You meant it. Maybe not in cruelty, maybe not consciously, but you meant it because it's easy. Because this stage has power, and you've never had, to think about how it feels to be on the other side of your jokes. You hide behind comedy, but what you're really doing is stripping people of their dignity, live, in front of millions." His voice carried across the room, heavy with years of swallowed humiliation, the kind of humiliation no camera ever caught. Fallon shifted, tugging at his tie, his laugh gone, his eyes darting toward the producers as if begging for intervention. But none came. The audience no longer looked at Fallon. They looked at Cruz, a man refusing, for the first time in his career, to wear the mask. His composure was frightening in its clarity. There was no performance here, no scripted moment. It was raw, unvarnished truth. Fallon, desperate, tried to soften the blow. His voice cracked slightly as he said, "But Tom, you're beloved. Everyone loves you. You're the biggest movie star in the world." Cruz leaned back, his gaze unwavering. "Beloved by whom? The same people who watch me mocked on loop, the same networks that replay my mistakes for laughs year after year. Beloved is not the same as respected, and I'm done pretending they're the same." The silence that followed was suffocating. Fallon, the man who once dictated the pace of laughter like a conductor, now sat stripped of rhythm, his smile trembling, his hands restless. And in that silence, the mask that Tom Cruise had worn for decades shattered. Not with anger, not with theatrics, but with the weight of a truth too long ignored. The studio was never designed for silence. Every inch of the Tonight Show set had been engineered for laughter, bright lights, polished wood, and cameras primed to catch smiles from every angle. But now, the silence stretched across the room like an unfamiliar guest no one dared acknowledge. Rows of faces stared at the stage, unsure whether they were still part of entertainment or witnesses to something that had slipped beyond comedy's boundaries. The laughter signs, usually the heartbeat of the show, blinked uselessly above the audience, ignored by people who no longer knew how to respond. Fallon tried first. He adjusted his posture, leaned forward, and raised his voice as if volume could restore rhythm. All right, he said, his grin sharpened into something almost brittle. "Tom's giving us the intense movie monologue tonight. This is why he's Hollywood's #1. You see that delivery? Goosebumps, right?" A thin ripple of chuckles sputtered from the back rows, but it died as quickly as it began. The audience wasn't buying it anymore. Fallon's cadence, once a trigger for automatic laughter, felt desperate, rehearsed, out of sync with the air in the room. Tom didn't flinch. He sat in stillness, eyes focused squarely on Fallon, his presence radiating the kind of gravity that silenced even the band. It was as though he had pulled the oxygen from the stage, leaving Fallon gasping for footing. Fallon shuffled his cue cards, his hands trembling just enough for the cameras to catch. He tried again, forcing levity into his voice. "Come on, people. This is the Tonight Show. We're supposed to be laughing, not holding a therapy session." From the second row, a man muttered audibly, "Feels more honest than anything else on this stage." The comment drew scattered nods, a quiet rebellion against the enforced comedy machine. Fallon's smile froze. His gaze darted toward the producers, behind the curtain. No signal came. They weren't cutting to commercial. They wanted this. The rawness, the unpredictability, the kind of chaos that trends online within minutes. Fallon realized he was alone. Tom leaned slightly closer, his voice just loud enough for the microphones to capture, but soft enough to feel intimate. "You see, Jimmy? This is the moment where you feel it. The silence, the weight. This is what it feels like when the joke doesn't land. Not because it isn't clever, but because it isn't true." Fallon swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing under the stage lights. "I was just trying to keep things light." "Light," Cruz repeated, his tone unyielding. "That's the word you cling to. Light means easy. Light means shallow. But what happens when lightness becomes the excuse for cruelty? When you laugh at pain, at effort, at humanity? Is it still light, or is it just empty?" The audience shifted again, but this time they weren't restless, Gaum. They were listening. Fallon's eyes scanned the rows of faces and found no relief. No smiles, no applause. Just the quiet scrutiny of a crowd no longer playing their part. He cleared his throat, trying once more. "Look, folks, you came here for a good time. You didn't sign up for a lecture. We love Tom, right?" He gestured toward Cruz, desperate for applause. A smattering followed, polite and restrained, nothing like the thunderous ovations he relied on to rescue a sinking moment. Cruz let the faint applause die before speaking again, his voice steady as stone. "They didn't sign up for a lecture. They signed up for truth. And maybe they didn't expect it, but now that it's here, they can feel the difference." The silence returned, heavier than before. Fallon's grin faltered completely, his face caught between defiance and dread. The audience, stripped of their role as laugh track accomplices, became something more dangerous. Witnesses. And in that moment, the balance of the Tonight Show shifted. It was no longer Fallon's stage. It was no longer comedy. It was confrontation. And the audience, silent and transfixed, was on Cruz's side.